The second my sleeve slipped down, my father's eyes locked onto the bruises covering my arm. His face turned pale. He grabbed my wrist and whispered, "Who did this to you?" I tried to pull away, but after 3 years of silence, I finally broke. Right there in the crowded reunion hall of the naval base where he had just landed after 21 years of deployment. My name is Harper Doyle. I am 25 years old, and for 3 years I had been the woman in the gated community everyone assumed had a perfect life. The one who always wore long sleeves even in the desert heat and always smiled at the mailbox. Nobody knew what those sleeves were hiding. My father did not ask me to explain everything in that hallway. He simply frowned, clenched his fists, and spoke with the calm, controlled voice of a man who had commanded soldiers for 20 years. "Pack your things," he said. "You are staying with me. Tomorrow we play their game, but by my rules. It started the way these things always start, quietly." My husband Grant convinced me to leave my job and work from home so I could help manage our property. And within months, my income and my coworkers were gone, replaced by his mother Marlene moving in to help around the house. At first, she seemed almost kind, bringing me tea, telling me she just wanted to make herself useful, and I believed her the way you believe anyone who smiles at you first. It took me longer than it should have to notice how every door in that house slowly needed her permission to open. One night I packed a small bag to leave, and Grant caught me in the hallway holding his phone, playing back secretly recorded clips of me crying and shouting during moments he had deliberately provoked, stripped of all context. "If you walk out that door," he said, "everyone will believe you are unstable." I dropped the bag. Without money or a car or proof, his threat worked exactly the way he wanted it to. A few weeks later, Hope showed up in the produce aisle of a grocery store, in the shape of my old friend Erin, who grabbed my hand the second she saw the fading bruise on my arm. "Come stay with me tonight," she said. "You cannot go back there." For 1 second, I almost said yes. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket, the tracking app Grant had installed lighting up with a message asking why I had not moved in 4 minutes. And I pulled my hand free and walked back toward the house I had started calling my prison, because hope, in that house, always came with a countdown. By the 3rd year, Grant's business was drowning in debt, and one night he slammed a stack of loan documents on the table, demanding I sign as guarantor. I refused. The next morning I found his laptop open, and, whether by luck or his carelessness, I found approved loans and credit statements totaling tens of thousands of dollars, my signature forged perfectly on every line. I printed the evidence, and that evening I threw it onto the coffee table in front of him. "Explain this," I said. Marlene walked in, looked at the papers, and told her son quietly that I needed to learn who made the decisions in this house. Grant grabbed my throat with both hands and shoved me into the marble edge of the kitchen island. I hit the floor gasping, pain tearing through my ribs, and Marlene helped him drag me by the wrists down the basement stairs while I begged them to stop. "You stay down here until you sign," Grant said, sliding the deadbolt shut from the outside. 3 slices of bread, a jug of water, and total darkness were all I had left. On the 3rd night, once I heard his car finally leave the driveway, I found the small, rusted ventilation grate near the ceiling, its screws weakened by weeks of storms. I climbed onto a broken metal rack, pulled until the screws snapped, and squeezed through the gap, dropping onto flooded grass outside. I ran barefoot through mud and broken branches until a taxi finally stopped for me on the highway, and I asked the driver, shaking, to take me straight to the naval base. "Look at me," my father said. Once we were alone in a locked tactical room at the base, his voice steady in a way that made me feel safe for the first time in years. "How long?" he asked. 3 years, I whispered. His jaw tightened, and for a moment I watched 21 years of military discipline hold back something much older and rawer underneath it. "You are never going back there," he said. "Not tomorrow, not ever." He took my phone from my hand without asking, powered it off, snapped the SIM card in half, and pocketed it, killing the tracking app instantly. Then he sat down across from me, folded his hands, and asked me to start from the beginning, and this time he did not just listen. He took notes like a man building a case. The first attorney we visited turned us away, telling my father gently that forged signature cases without direct financial records rarely held up quickly, and for one long night I watched my father pace the guest quarters convinced he had failed me. It was not until the second attorney, a sharp litigator named Callahan, actually opened Grant's bank statements that the real evidence surfaced. Years of my father's own military allowance quietly diverted into investment accounts under Grant's name, secured through a forged power of attorney. Callahan also pulled community security footage showing, in time-stamped detail, Grant and Marlene dragging me across the porch days earlier. My father split the case into two piles himself: physical abuse to state police, financial fraud to federal investigators, refusing to let either agency slow the other down. He sat beside me through every interview, correcting nothing, simply present, a wall between me and the version of myself that used to apologize for existing. 2 weeks later, 3 cruisers arrived at the villa, and the sheriff served Grant and Marlene protective orders on their own front porch, while my father watched from across the street, arms crossed, saying nothing at all, needing to say nothing at all. The financial freeze hit within days, and Grant's business collapsed without the stolen money propping it up. Debt collectors flooding his phone as a foreclosure notice went up on his own front door. It was months later, buried deep in loan processing records nobody had thought to check first, that investigators found the real second signature behind the fraud, not Marlene, but Clara, Grant's sister, who had used her position at a lending firm to quietly approve and conceal every forged document from the inside. She was arrested at her desk in handcuffs, and I remember feeling almost nothing when I heard, because by then I had learned that betrayal in that family was never really a surprise, only a matter of who confessed to it last. I saw Grant one final time, across a mediation table, his hands shaking around a pen. "You will regret this," he said quietly, not looking up. "No," I told him, "I regret staying." He signed the settlement without another word, surrendering every claim, though we both knew a signature would not erase the federal charges waiting for him outside that room. The courtroom, 6 months later, was smaller than I expected and colder. I sat beside my father as the judge read the verdict aloud: aggravated identity theft, credit fraud, felony false imprisonment, no possibility of early parole. When the marshals cuffed Grant and led him out, I did not cry the way I thought I would. I just felt my father's hand close firmly over mine, and he leaned over and said only 3 words: "It is over." Outside the courthouse steps, in the sudden Arizona sunlight, my father pulled me into a hug that lasted longer than any hug we had ever shared, and I felt every year of silence I had carried finally leave my chest at once. Marlene lost her savings to a restitution order and was evicted from the foreclosed villa. Clara lost her license and her career in a single afternoon. None of it felt like triumph. It just felt like weight finally being set down. Weeks later, my father helped me carry the last box into a small rented house in a quiet coastal town, nothing like the gated community I had once mistaken for safety. He stood in the empty living room, looked around at the bare walls, and told me this was the first home either of us would build without anyone else's permission required to open a single door. I sat on the floor that night, credit disputes finally cleared, my name finally my own again, and understood the most expensive lesson of my life: that real family does not require conditions. It simply shows up in the dark and pulls you out, exactly the way my father did. If Harper's story touched your heart, leave a heart in the comments and tell me, what would you have done in her place? And do not forget to subscribe to the Revenge Tales for more unforgettable stories, because I will see you in the next one.